Hello, welcome to the August 3rd, 2014 edition of the ASICS Snakepit Video Roundtable. We got Clefo, we got James, maybe some more, question mark, coming up your way. But first, let's talk about some Diamondback stock, which I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about because nothing happened within the last week, much less the past 2 days. But soldier on. I I think we'll start chronologically since the last time we had a show. Thursday, the non-waiver trade deadline happened. The Diamondbacks made two moves, sending Gerardo Parra to the Brewers for a few minor leaguers, and sending Martin Prado to the Yankees for also a minor leaguer and a player to be named later. So, James, what's your initial take on these deals?
Um, I think my biggest problem with the Diamondbacks at the trade deadline is holding tight to their high leverage relievers in the bullpen when the market was clearly paying a premium for them. I'm not entirely surprised that the Diamondbacks didn't make a ton of deals. This was a year for major leaguers being traded for major leaguers. Really no real prospects were moved coming into this deadline, with the exception of um, Addison Russell for Oakland, going for Samardzija, and that's pretty key. But I mean, nobody was giving up prospects for anything less than top star caliber. Basically, for Gerardo Parra, we traded somebody who is almost certainly going to be a non-tender candidate for a younger, cheaper version of himself. The guy doesn't quite have Parra's cannon defensively, but he profiles very similar to Gerardo Parra offensively, and looks like he won't embarrass himself in the field. We'll see whether or not he ever makes it to the bigs. In terms of trading Martin Prado, would I have liked to have seen a bigger return for him? Sure, but at the same time, his contract is kind of steep for a guy whose wins above replacement are defensively dependent. I don't think that he earns quite as high marks playing out in right field and left field as he does playing at third. And given that he's not hitting for the 300 plus average and he's not driving in runs, I think the Yankees were one of the few teams that were going to pick up that kind of contract. And given that they were one of the few teams willing to pick up the entirety of the contract, I'm not shocked that instead of getting like an R.J. Murphy, we wound up with what we did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That it it, it seems like the getting Prado's contract out the books sort of would cost a lesser sort of prospect. The guy's interesting though, Peter O'Brien. That's who we're referring to, in case you didn't know. And if you did, what's wrong with you? But but uh, but yeah, it it seems like the main thing is getting some contract flexibility for next year will invariably be wasted on arbitration raises for Addison Reed and or Mark Trumbo or something. But in theory, it's good. And as far as Para, I'm not as I'm not as high on the Para juice as some other people have been. You know, his value was mainly defensive, and he didn't really have that defensive value this year, and he couldn't hit lefties for the damn. He really had one, fairly above average offensive season ever, and that was in 2011. Yeah, 2011, where he OPS 784 from the eight hole, but the Diamondbacks sort of capitalized on that by signing Jason Kubel for some reason. So Gerardo Parra, he had a sort of mixed legacy in Arizona because I remember when he first came out, everyone did like. He was like, oh, cool. Then everyone didn't like him around 2010, 2011. He bounces back a little, sort of gets shafted a bit in 12 and 13, and it's weird, but it's one of those things that you got a few live warm bodies for him, and you save some money. So I guess not too much to complain about. Maybe you wanted better warm bodies, but again, like I said, I think it's Gerardo Parra, but who I'm not high
It's
on.
Gerardo Parra, and he was through arbitration. He was almost certainly, even with his down year this year, going to hit the 6.5 million, maybe even 7 million mark. Heaven forbid he went on a tear the last 2 months of the season and really cranked up his batting average and got a couple extra dingers out there. Who knows what maybe it's 7.5 or 8 at that point, which makes him a non-tender anyway. There's no way you justify paying 7 million for Gerardo Parra to be 2.5 wins above replacement defensively, but barely replacement level offense. He can't hit left-handed pitching, and you don't have another $3 million platoon to pair with him. So you just don't spend that. So chances are he gets non-tendered at the end of the year, so then you would have gotten nothing for him. At least this way we got a sort of prospect and a lottery ticket. I'm not expecting anything from Banda, but if Banda makes it all the way and actually provides anything positive, that's going to be icing on the cake as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and speaking of cake, and perhaps wait, I'm waiting for it until he actually gets on. But yeah, just to finish that thought. Yeah, it's far as it's pretty much everything I said before. But speaking of cake, and especially that which you microwave, we've got Soko here, and we were just talking about the Diamondbacks trade deadline deals, and what do you think about them? Specifically the Prado and Parra ones.
I strongly support the notion that you can microwave cake, and I believe anyone who fights this is they're scared of change. That's my position. Oh, you want to talk about the trades? Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of odd because moving Prado makes sense, given that he's obviously not going to have that 5 WAR season again. He's in decline, if not necessarily sharply, but there's that. But it just, given what we had to give up to get him, and yes, he came with other players, but he was the key part of it. What we had to give up to get him, now essentially we're flipping Upton and Johnson to get a minor league catcher and a bunch of other minor league parts. So it's a bit disappointing, but hopefully O'Brien will work out.
Yeah, that is an interesting part of the Prado trade, which someone here may have written about a few days ago. And I have to say, I'm really proud that an article I could write can inspire the same stupid goddamn arguments that can in the comment sections that So hats off to me. But yeah, I think it is seriously an important thing to consider. Since nothing happens in a vacuum. That was sort of the point of what I wrote, that Prado at his value for O'Brien and Cash or whoever is sort of like, yeah, you can see that. But if you factor the Upton trade, it's like, ooh, maybe not the greatest thing. And like I said in that article, flipping Upton, okay, fine, you do that. Prado doesn't work out, but then you realize, oh, we need that power back. And you get Mark bad-wording Trumbo to hit barely 200 and not hit a home run since he's come off the DL or anything. So it seems like maybe not the most. It seems like a tacit admission that Kevin Towers like, well, my bad, screwed that one up. Later, guys.
My big problem is that with the Prado Upton now O'Brien thing is that really the Diamondbacks aren't flipping Prado from the Upton trade at this point. They're flipping Prado from the extension that they gave him. They got 1 year of Martin Prado, plus, Delgado, Spruill, Ahmed, and Drury. And then they signed Prado to the extension, which was absolutely full market value and probably about what he would have signed for if he'd have been a free agent, without trading Upton. If he had never left Atlanta and just hit the free agent market, they would have probably been able to get him for the same contract that they gave him the extension. So I'm not quite as worried about the whole, well, this doesn't look good in terms of having traded Upton for Prado, because we traded Upton for the 1 year of Prado. It looks a lot less positive in the contract that we subsequently gave Prado. At this point, Delgado has kind of become, well, he's been a bust compared to what he was expected to be. Sproul was kind of the non-factor we all anticipated. We don't know what we've got with Ahmed yet. It's beginning to look like Drury might be the hidden gem of the entire trade. But we're going to have to wait 3 or 4 more years to see if he ever really materializes into something worth trading Justin Upton for.
I think if there's one interesting thing about the Prado trade that no one's really talked about yet, because we've been focusing on the fact that Prado didn't really produce a ton for us and that he was originally moved or acquired because we moved Upton. But the player that we did acquire, or at least the currently named one, may be a signal of the plan that the Diamondbacks are attempting to put together to replace Montero. Not immediately, but trying to develop guys with the recognition that he's not going to last forever. And even if he's had a bounce back year this year, it's still the writing's on the wall. You want to get someone developed so that way when he is done, you have one ready. But the problem in this scenario is that, the word on O'Brien is that he's a good power hitter, but probably as bad at defense as I would be if I had to be a catcher right this second.
The lack of depth behind Montero is why I was really hoping that when they said they were going after a Yankees catcher for Prado, I had the unreasonable but still slightly Homer fan wish that it was Sanchez, and knowing that it wasn't that, at least hoping that they did whatever it took to make it Murphy. And all accounts are they tried really hard to pry Murphy away in the Prado deal, and it just wasn't happening. But you have to kind of wonder what was the premium above and beyond Prado that would have made it happen if Murphy ever came into the conversation to begin with. And that's where I start to get a little bit iffy about why didn't we move some of these high leverage bullpen arms if they could have maybe made a difference to bring in a guy like Murphy who we know is going to stick behind the plate versus an all or nothing guy with a huge upside in O'Brien, but then he's got the basement of a guy who never gets beyond Double-A.
Yeah, it is kind of weird that they didn't try to move, like Reed or Ziegler or even Perez. Like Perez should have been like the easiest contract to move because he's on a 2-year deal, but it's for like $1.5 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, a year AAV. But yeah, that's sort of seg to the next thing I want to talk about regarding the trade deadline, who we didn't move, the relievers and stuff. But there was a quote from KT. It was in where it said, "Oh well, if someone had offered an overpay, we would have listened." And it's like, no, if someone would have offered an overpay, you take that and run with it. What's wrong with you? Well, that's rhetorical, but it just seems weird that, as you mentioned, the market for relievers is just so skewed towards the seller that nothing happened. And if you're trying to rebuild, I mean, relievers are fairly replaceable.
Especially in our current system.
Yeah, don't tell Josh Burns that, but yeah, you can easily replace relievers for the most part without too much of a loss of quality.
Not to apologize too much for Kevin Towers, I would certainly like to see him with the Padres and not be our problem anymore. But I think we're overanalyzing that statement a bit in that you can overpay and it doesn't have to be a gross overpay. So someone could have offered something that maybe is just slightly above the value you would expect in return, but then look around and say, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily fit the plan that I want or the plan that we currently have in place, so I'm not going to do it. But I might listen, as opposed to a gross overpay where someone calls up and they say, hey, you want Mike Trout for Oliver Perez? Obviously you're taking that deal, but there's a vast range of what an overpay could be. And then the second point being that by all intents and purposes and everything else they're saying, they really do believe they're going to compete next year. That's probably a mistake. I don't agree with that statement, but they're acting like they think they're going to compete next year, so a slight overpay is probably not going to be enough to get good bullpen guys away, especially if they're cheap.
Part of this that bothers me is they've made statements to the effect that this is helping them put together the money to get rotation help for next year. This rotation doesn't actually need help. This rotation needs a top of the rotation ace type arm. That's not just help. That's a huge investment, or more likely good development. There are really only 2 or 3 names on the market coming up this free agency that qualify in that range, and the Diamondbacks have no business chasing any of the 3. Even if they can save up enough money to do it, they're taking a huge gamble that it's going to pay off in the first season, because they're not going to have any flexibility. It's got to be World Series or bust kind of mentality. There's no wiggle room left if they go out and sign a John Lester or a Max Scherzer, and suddenly that guy goes down like Arroyo did out of nowhere. Arroyo is suddenly on the DL. Well, you go out and you sign Lester for $21 million a year for 5 years, and he goes down in the first or second year. You're kind of out of luck if you're the Diamondbacks. You can't just absorb that and move on.
I think it's a fantasy if anyone thinks that we're actually going to get, no matter how much money we clear, that we're going to get a top of the rotation guy, unless we're just going to grossly overpay for somebody. Someone who hangs around and still isn't signed by almost spring training, and then we get desperate and we sign them. But we're not a destination right now. There's not really any reason for anyone to want to come to us, and there's going to be other teams that need pitching as well. So I can't imagine Scherzer or Lester are going to be sitting around waiting for Arizona to call and having us be the last great hope. They could clear as much money as they want out, but I really don't think we're going to be getting it. But that just goes back to the point of, yeah, they may have a plan in place, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to execute it, because it's a limited market. There's only so many teams and so many players, and they have to compete with them, and it's not like they can go out and get anybody they want. There are a lot of restrictions in place, so instead of trying to live in this fantasy where we're going to go out and get top of the rotation help and compete next year, maybe they should start thinking about, okay, well, what pieces can we dismantle? What guys are young enough that they're going to be able to stick around through this rebuilding process? And then, maybe punt a year or two and take it from there, especially since competing against the Dodgers next year or the Giants next year or the next couple of years, since they're still probably going to be pretty good, is going to be a lot tougher with the limited pieces we have in place. Punt.
I'm also not keen on giving up a draft pick plus the money for Scherzer or Shields. If we're going to have a terrible season this season, let's at least get a decent draft pick to show for it. I mean, granted, both Scherzer and Shields are probably 85%, 90% chance they're going to be better than whatever player we get at 5th or 6th in the draft, because they are elite talents. But those possible elite talents are ones that will be under our control for the next 5-6 years, versus what little bit we get.
I was going to say, if we pick in the top 10 or something, that draft pick is protected under the new CBA from.
This is true. It would be
Yeah.
our second pick that we'd forfeited then.
Yeah. But you know, haha, silver lining. Um, Speaking of things not related to this, awkward segues and all that. On Friday, something kind of bad happened in the sense that Paul Goldschmidt was hit by a pitch in his hand. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of intentional retaliation, whatever, because quite frankly, but yeah, he's hit on the hand. It's fractured. He's lost for the season. It's just the sort of icing on the ennui cake for the 2014 Arizona Diamondbacks. That is just like, oh, you're one nice thing. Yeah, you don't have it for the last 2 months.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'd have to say that pretty much does sum it up. I mean, we were already kind of circling the drain, but at least Goldschmidt was a nice highlight on a pretty much nightly basis, and now we don't even have that to look forward to. I guess the silver lining now is that it almost forces their hand to start trying out some young talent, whether it be finally calling Lamb up to play third and moving guys over, or just getting Trumbo out of the outfield and over onto first base so that Peralta continues to get regular starts even after Pollock comes back, whatever it is. At least now we'll get to see some young talent, but I'd rather not have it come at the expense of Paul Goldschmidt being down for the year, especially with something as sensitive as getting his hand broken, which, from his interview, it looks like he's going to be okay, but broken hands have ended careers too.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but it's this late in the season. Just shut him down. I mean, don't risk anything. Let him heal throughout the off season and stuff. And
There's no reason he should come back this year, even though they're saying 6 to 8 weeks. Just don't do it.
Yeah, just let him heal. Give your best player 6 to 8 weeks of not playing on the Diamondbacks just as a little reward for sticking out the season. And yeah, it is just a bummer though, because but I mean, you get to see Trumbo at first base, where it's the only position in the field he should play. But at the same time, when Goldschmidt comes back, he's whisked back to the outfield again for more fun with ill-timed dives and stuff. But it's a thing. I'm thrilled to see Jordan Pacheco in the 2-hole for the rest of the season, because why not?
I did like seeing David Peralta in the 3-hole last night.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was actually kind of a nice acknowledgement of the fact that whether this guy is ever going to come back down to earth or not, if this is a fluke or if this is really who he is, he's been getting it done, and it was nice to see him put in a position where he might thrive doing that.
Yeah, I've been enjoying Peralta's play a lot. So, I mean, he started out slow, but I've also been enjoying Inciarte a lot too. So, I don't know. The season's been dead for a while, so it sucks to see Goldschmidt go down to an injury like that, and it makes me worry for the future and hope that it doesn't mess him up for what is turning out, or at least appears to be, a bright and promising career. But we're definitely in that spot of the season where, well, we might as well let the young guys play and see what we have, and maybe there'll be some guys that can stick, and maybe they'll have just 1 month or two, and that's it. But there is a certain amount of fun for that.
Don't cry out loud. And really, a man in a Bills jersey, I assume, crying. Never see that. But
Who'd have thunk that the Bills would ever make a guy cry?
Yeah, never happened.
Not
No.
once.
Not twice. 4.
Anyway, 5 if you count the Music City Miracle. But anyway,
Oh.
sorry. But to get back on topic, I was gonna say, yeah, it is kind of fun to see young guys, and it's kind of fun to when Jim makes a Spolkle quiz 5 years from now, you're trying to remember, oh God, this guy, and by this guy I'm probably referring to, I don't know, Andy Marte or Nick Evans or something, was on the team. And it's like, wow, I kind of remember that now, because I don't know, there's a certain amount of fun remembering that you're like, oh God, I remember that. What don't I remember? What have I done with my life?
Everyone will remember Nick Evans mostly because they keep talking about how he's the most overhyped guy to come through the system.
I don't disagree, but that's another thing for another time. He's in Japan now, hopefully enjoying weird vending machines and resentment towards foreigners, so that's fun. And let's shift gears. Again, I am over the retaliation hot takes, and I'm moderating this thing right now. So, we're not going to talk about that. But we will get to questions in the thread here and other places. By other places, I just mean a thread because I didn't bother to ask for questions anywhere else. This is from Joe CB1991. Jake Lamb, when will we see him, and when should we see him? Should be now, he adds.
I would like to see him now. When this all first started going down, according to Towers, we weren't going to see him until spring because of the 40-man roster limitations and trying to protect certain players from the Rule 5 and so forth. But now he seems to kind of backed off that stance, and we're being told that he'll probably come up for a September call-up. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is here the second day of September. The sooner we get him here, the better. The third base job is essentially his to lose at this point. We're not going to run forward with Andy Marte as our everyday third baseman in 2015, or even Jordan Pacheco. It's going to be Jake Lamb unless he completely falls to pieces, and there's no indication of why that would happen. He may not be raking .330 with 30 bombs at the MLB level, but I think given that he's an above-average defender and he's shown the ability to hit, that he'll stick well enough that it's his job to lose. Let's get him some at-bats this year so he's ready when opening day rolls around next year. Maybe we can avoid an April like this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with either of those assessments. I think, though, I would not be surprised if we don't see him in September at all. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see him till spring. I hope we see him soon, but September would be fine by me. I mean, he should start probably seeing some Major League pitching and seeing what he can do, but I guess I'm not going to really be that heartbroken about it. I don't know.
Man, if there was only a famous movie quote I could throw out now regarding the context of crying in the sports of baseball, but I got nothing. I think, kind of treat Lamb like you sort of treated Chris Owings last season. Late call up, see if he could stick. When they talk about the 40-man roster thing, it's like, who are they trying to protect? For the Rule 5 draft. Because I can't think of many people. It's like, and do you really need, say, a Marte, either of them, on your 40-man roster come spring to make room for anyone else? I'm just asking questions here.
There were some of us, I think we came up with 7 or 8 names that need to be added to the 40-man to avoid the Rule 5, and given that they're either actual prospects like Brandon Drury or guys that we just recently acquired like Bornstein for Thatcher, they're guys that you go ahead and you make sure you put on there regardless of what their futures look like. simply because if you were going to go through the trouble of acquiring them at this point, obviously you think they're worth something. But we got a couple guys coming off at the end of the season in Pennington, and Andy Marte is almost certainly coming off. He may come back as a non-roster invitee in the spring, but they aren't going to hold up a 40-man roster spot for somebody like him. And then we were already down to 36 as it was. And then you got guys like Alfredo Marte that can come off. Brewer can probably come off. And then you got Joe Patterson is technically still on the 40-man, and that's just a waste of space at this point. It's abundantly clear that guy is never going to see another meaningful inning for this organization, so there's no reason he has to be left on the 40-man. So there's plenty of room to be had to protect everybody they need to protect, call up somebody like Lamb, and still have room to take somebody in the Rule 5 draft, although given the construction of our 25-man roster, you got to kind of wonder who they would be targeting, since they would have to be on our 25-man to stick.
Yeah.
I've kind of forgotten the question. So I'm just going to talk about retaliation hit by pitches.
I have the power to... Aha! I muted you! On my own. Nah, I'm kidding.
I already muted myself, though, so it doesn't really count. I mean, the viewers can't see that, but... yeah, I'm sorry. I honestly can't remember what the question was.
I was there when KT was talking about, we need to protect guys on the 40-man, 40-man.
Basically, anything KT says, I don't believe, or I do believe that he's 100% serious, and I can't believe he's serious. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, KT.
I get the vibe from him like he's a press secretary for the George W. Bush administration. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Hot takes.
Yeah. I do get the metaphor. So yeah, it's just sort of yeah. So does that make Ken Kendrick GWB, and then who's going to throw a shoe at him? I'm just asking questions because that would be awesome.
Nick Picaro would be no. It'd have to be a reporter from a different team.
So some like Dodgers or Giants beat reporter.
Yeah, I don't know who it would be though.
I'd say Grant Bisbee, but he's got too much class.
Yeah. No, I could see him doing it.
The problem is that we don't really have the sort of hegemonic power that we're imposing on another team or fan base. I mean, we're kind of like Italy's historical foreign power.
Nerd.
Yeah, I'm a nerd, Liz. Except that you married me.
And had
so I don't know.
Yeah. I'll move on to more questions from the thread. This is from Kishi. This is not on topic, but I don't care. We got like 5-10 minutes to kill. If you were on a cooking show and were asked to make a comfort food as your first item, what would you make? There's a second part to this question. And would you laugh at the contestant who wanted to make oysters Rockefeller? I'd make chicken soup.
Hold on, I gotta look up what oysters Rockefeller is.
To get the joke?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm assuming it has oysters in it, but I hope it's not made with real Rockefellers.
Like say, that one?
Nelson, or David, or John. I'm running out of Rockefellers.
West
Unless
Virginia.
you're talking about Jay-Z.
West Virginia Senator Jay Rockefeller.
Sure.
I don't know.
Why not?
But, yeah.
Okay, so if anybody else is watching that is stupid like me and doesn't know, Oyster Rockefeller consists of oysters on the half shell topped with various other ingredients, often parsley and other green herbs, a rich butter sauce, and breadcrumbs, then they are baked or broiled. That sounds pretty good. I mean,
They are pretty good.
I've never had oysters at all, so maybe I would hate it, but I think I'd be okay with that being a comfort food.
Comfort food, baked mac and cheese.
That'd probably be pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah. Soko, just to put it on the record, because it is a question in the thread, are you drunk?
I'm not drunk. I have not had any alcohol today, so I'm just naturally weird.
Why not?
And I don't know why Devin's asking that, because he's hung out with me before multiple times and been in these video chats with me. Why would you think I'm drunk?
You'll have to ask him. He's not here for some reason.
If he's watching, he can put it in the thread.
Yeah. Also from Devin, if we're comparing other teams to a country that's been invaded and kind of turned into rubble, wouldn't the Padres be a better choice?
Yeah, I mean, sure. No. We can all be, war-torn countries if we want to be.
I mean, the Astros seem more like the apt.
What was that?
The Astros seem to be more like the apt comparison here because they've been torn down to nothing, and then it's like, oh, we're going to rebuild them in a way, and then through various things, it might not work out the way they planned it. And I'm saying that Brady Aiken is the same as a insurgent uprising. This is probably the worst set of metaphors we've ever done in this show, but I'm okay with that. Anything to add about anything, James? Well, hey, just mute myself and compose my thoughts.
I'm just staying out of this whole bad metaphor thing.
Join us on the bad metaphor dark side.
The Houston Astros are Iraq. Well, have you ever been to Houston? I haven't either, so I don't know.
Kind of an armpit.
Yeah, so I've heard. It's very humid. One last question from Joe again. Compared to other lineups we have seen throughout Diamondbacks history, how depressing was this one? I assume the one that was thrown out today. I'm going to say that, yeah, I mean, this is pretty good because 2004, 2005, 2006 still had the presence of a Luis Gonzalez or the occasional Steve Finley or something. This just had Miguel Montero and then a bunch of underachieving, or not even Miguel Montero because Ghostwitch started. So it just
short of Nick Ahmed, Peralta, the rest of the lineup I really couldn't care less about. And I think the depressing thing about some of the lineups we're going to be running out, and we run out the last 2 days, is right now they lack both the veteran star worth watching and the youthful core that we could at least get used to because they're going to be part of the future. They're just kind of place warmers for next year's team. Makes it a lot harder to stay vested in them.
What was the question? My daughter was screaming in my ear, so I don't have no idea.
If you look at today's starting lineup for the Diamondbacks, how depressing was it considering the total lack of any star power whatsoever?
It was one game.
I think that's a good answer. I guess one last. Yeah.
Think of it this way: the last couple of years, Astros have been pretty terrible. Yet they didn't lose every single game. They won games. They probably even won some blowouts. We could probably look it up and find blowouts that the Astros managed to pull off. Even the worst team possible, 2004 Detroit Tigers, the 61 or 62 Mets, Whatever their first season was, I'm blanking on which one it was. I think it was 62. It's going to happen because that's sort of stuff happens regardless of the sport. Sometimes bad teams, they get good for one game and they win. So would I expect it to continue going forward? Probably not, but maybe they will play above their heads because it's a bunch of guys who maybe haven't had a bunch of chances or are younger, and so they're just going to play out of their minds, and then it'll be inexplicable, and then Kevin Towers will get really excited and then get overconfident and make a bunch of stupid moves, and next year will be so.
Wow, 3 times already. I can confirm what you said about let's say last year's Astros. On September 10th, Houston beat the Seattle Mariners 13-2. On July 31st, the Astros beat the Orioles 11-0. On April 29th, they beat the Yankees 9-1. So yeah, there's a few of those in there. Really few, but yeah. I think.
And we didn't win by that much today. We won in the 10th inning, and frankly, off of a play that very easily could have gone against us. And
that was
being that we were in extra innings, it was kind of a 50-50 coin toss anyways. So it's great that they won. It's great that they didn't just lay down and die. It's great that, some guys that you normally don't expect any production out of, like Jordan Pacheco or Tuffy Gossowich, managed to get some hits and doubles and, or spunky and gritty and all that sort of thing. But it's just, I don't know. I don't have any expectations, but it's that sort of stuff that can make these bad seasons fun, where you look back and you remember, hey, remember when we had a guy named Augie Ojeda?
That's not a real person. Be quiet. But yeah, I mean, Nick Ahmed doing his best Dikembe Mutombo impersonation in the game. So yeah, that was nice. I think this is a good time as any to wrap up. Is there anything either of you want to bring up before I hit the stop broadcast button?
Peace.
Fire Kevin Towers.
Yes, fire him. Fire all of him. But yeah, go to easysnakepit.com, watch us every week, follow it on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. You know what the hell's going on. Good night. See you next week.
Good night.